Xander Thorne's Tribeca penthouse was more than a residence, it was a monument to control. 3 stories of bulletproof glass and reinforced steel perched above Manhattan like a raptor's nest, every surface whispering of unimaginable wealth and paranoia. The air itself was filtered through HEPA systems that hummed a constant, low-frequency hymn to cleanliness. At 42, Xander had built Aegis Cyber from a dorm room startup into a billion-dollar empire that guarded the secrets of nations and corporations alike. Yet tonight, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of Central Park, he felt the familiar hollow ache. 5 years. 5 years since Berlin, since the ambush in that rain-slicked alley, since Sarah vanished into the digital and physical ether. The official report called it presumed deceased. His own security team, the best in the world, had found nothing but ghost stories and dead ends. The German authorities had closed the case, but in the silent hours, he could still hear the echo of her last transmission, the static-filled gasp before the line went dead forever. He had built this fortress to keep the world out, only to find he had imprisoned himself within it. His personal AI, Janus, adjusted the lighting to a cooler hue, sensing his elevated stress levels through biometric sensors woven into the very fabric of the walls. He was the master of this domain, a king whose every whim was anticipated by code, and yet he ruled over a kingdom of one. The bus from Columbus, Ohio, deposited Chloe Bennett into the Port Authority bus terminal with a hydraulic sigh. She clutched a single, worn suitcase, all that remained of a life that had fractured 6 months ago. The car accident on I-71 had been swift and merciless, taking her parents and leaving her, at 24, as the sole guardian of her 16-year-old brother, Ethan. Their new home was a 300-square-foot studio in Astoria, Queens, a world away from the sprawling suburban home she'd grown up in. The air smelled of cumin and exhaust instead of cut grass. Ethan, a coding prodigy whose dreams were woven in binary and game engines, had taken the loss hard, retreating into his laptop. The cleaning job at the Thorne residence, secured through a temp agency after weeks of rejections, wasn't just a paycheck, it was the thread holding their fragile new reality together. It was Ethan's tuition, his therapy, their groceries. It was hope. Her first shift began at 5 a.m., the city still cloaked in indigo. The head of housekeeping, a stern woman named Maria, had given her a brisk tour the day before, her eyes lingering on Chloe's second-hand shoes. Mr. Thorne values discretion and order above all else, Maria had said, her voice like chipped ice. You see nothing, you hear nothing, you are a ghost. That first morning, tasked with polishing the vast living room's marble floors, Chloe found herself paralyzed before the main window. The sun was just cresting over the East River, setting the skyline ablaze in a way no photograph could ever capture. It was a view that spoke of power and immense, isolating loneliness. In that moment, she didn't see a billionaire's plaything, she saw a beautiful, empty cage. The soft swoosh of the elevator doors broke her reverie. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Xander Thorne stood there, dressed in a black running suit, his body coiled with the energy of a predator. He was taller than she'd imagined, and his eyes, a piercing, unnervingly direct gray, swept over her, missing nothing. Startled, her grip on the expensive glass bottle of organic cleaner faltered. It slipped from her fingers, hitting the Venetian marble with a sound like a gunshot, a vibrant blue liquid pooling at their feet. Time suspended. He didn't flinch. His gaze moved from the spill to her face, and she felt it like a physical weight. Who are you? The voice was low, devoid of warmth, each word a carefully placed data point. It wasn't a shout, it was an interrogation. Her throat was dust. Chloe Bennett, the new cleaner. Her Midwestern accent, usually soft, felt thick and clumsy in the pristine silence. He took a single step forward, not toward her, but around the spill, his running shoes silent on the stone. Security in this building isn't a suggestion, Ms. Bennett. It's the only rule. There are no second chances for carelessness. One mistake. His eyes locked with hers. That's all it takes. He moved past her toward the private gym, but not before their eyes met for a final, electric second. He expected to see fear, contrition, the cowering of a subordinate. Instead, he saw something that unnerved him far more, a deep, quiet understanding, a flicker of pity that seemed to see past the billionaire, past the CEO, to the wounded man hiding within the armor. It felt like a breach. Chloe did not break. She returned the next day, and the day after, her movements precise and silent. She became a gentle, persistent force of nature within his sterile ecosystem. She didn't try to ingratiate herself, she simply was. Xander began to notice the subtle changes. A faint, clean scent of lavender soap lingered in the halls after she passed. He once, from his office, heard the soft, off-key hum of a Shania Twain song from the library. When he investigated, he found her dusting his first edition Hemingways, her back to him, completely absorbed in her task. She left a small, vibrant potted succulent on the kitchen windowsill, a tiny, defiant burst of life in the monochrome landscape. The penthouse, for the first time, began to feel like it could be a home, and that terrified him. Victoria Sterling watched this quiet invasion from her glass-walled office adjacent to Xander's, her perfectly manicured hands steepled under her chin. At 45, with a Harvard MBA and a ruthlessness that had carved a path through the male-dominated tech world, she had dedicated a decade to Xander Thorne. Not just to Aegis Cyber, but to him. She had orchestrated mergers, neutralized competitors, and curated his public life, all with the unspoken expectation that she would one day claim her rightful place beside him. This girl from Ohio, with her earnest eyes and simple clothes, was a variable her sophisticated algorithms of social climbing and corporate warfare had not accounted for. "She's playing a very long, very patient game," Victoria murmured to the head of finance over espresso in the building's private cafe. She kept her voice light, conversational. The "aw shucks" routine is a classic. Pay attention to how she lingers near his study, how she memorizes his schedule. It's calculated. The seed of doubt was planted with surgical precision. It was 2 a.m. when Xander, haunted by a nightmare of Berlin, the smell of cordite, the cold rain, Sarah's pleading voice, abandoned his bed. He padded into the kitchen for water, the floor cool beneath his feet. He found her there. Chloe was sitting at the vast, empty kitchen island, a single overhead light casting a soft glow. She cradled a mug of tea in both hands, her gaze fixed on the wall-mounted monitor where a financial news channel dissected a catastrophic data breach at a rival tech giant. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep and remembered fear. She started, nearly spilling her tea. "Mr. Thorne, no, my brother, Ethan. He's in a panic about his online gaming accounts after this." She gestured weakly at the screen. "I told him he's being silly, that the best cybersecurity in the world protects this building, that you protect it." She said it not as flattery, but as a simple, unshakable article of faith. The raw honesty of it, the unearned trust, struck him with a force that left him breathless. It was a currency he hadn't encountered in years. He simply nodded, filled his glass with water, and retreated, but the image of her, small and worried in the massive kitchen, her concern not for herself but for her brother, burned itself into his mind. Victoria's moment came during the frenetic preparations for Aegis Cyber's IPO roadshow. The penthouse was a whirlwind of lawyers, bankers, and PR consultants. During the chaos, she slipped into the staff changing room. With hands that did not tremble, she took the prototype smartwatch from her blazer pocket, a one-of-a-kind Aegis device that monitored vitals and housed encrypted communications, a piece of tech that was Xander's personal pet project. She slid it into the depths of Chloe's assigned locker, tucked beneath a spare uniform. The discovery was made 2 hours later, swift, public, and humiliating. Maria found it during a random locker inspection, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. Chloe was summoned to Xander's office. The room was filled with the tense presence of Victoria, Maria, and the head of security. The watch lay on his obsidian desk, a silent, damning exhibit. "Explain this," Xander commanded. His voice was quiet, which made it all the more dangerous. A muscle twitched in his jaw. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, sharpening the old, familiar pain of Berlin. Chloe's face was ashen, but she held her spine straight. Her eyes, wide with shock, found his and held. "I didn't take it, Mr. Thorne. I've never seen it before. I don't even know what it is." Her voice was a tremor, but it didn't break. Someone wants you to think I'm a thief. But I don't steal, not things." Her gaze swept over Victoria's smug expression before returning to him, pleading, desperate. "And not trust, that's all I have left." In that moment, he heard the echo of his old mentor, a grizzled CIA handler. "Xander, you can read code like poetry, but you've forgotten how to read the human heart. You see patterns in everything except people." A cold clarity washed over him. He looked at Victoria, at the barely concealed triumph in her eyes. He looked at Chloe, at the raw, unvarnished truth in hers. "Everyone out," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that crackled with authority. "Now." Victoria's smile faltered. "Xander, surely we need to." Out. The room emptied, the heavy door clicking shut, leaving them in a silence that was thick and heavy as velvet. Alone, the anger drained from him, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weariness. He walked to the window, turning his back on her, on the watch, on the wreckage. "Why," he asked the glittering, indifferent city, "should I believe you?" He heard her take a shaky breath behind him. "Because I've lost everything else. My home, my parents, the life I knew." Her voice grew stronger, laced with a fierce, wounded pride. I won't let anyone take my integrity. You can fire me, you can have this job, but you can't have that. He turned to face her. The security footage, pulled by Janus and displayed on his main screen, didn't lie. It showed Victoria, her face a mask of cold concentration, planting the device. The evidence was irrefutable. Victoria Sterling was escorted from the Aegis Cyber headquarters by security before the sun set, her career, her ambitions, turning to ash. Later, back in the penthouse, the formalities of employer and employee fell away, leaving two people stripped bare by the day's events. "I'm sorry," Xander said. The words felt foreign, rusty from disuse. Chloe simply nodded, her eyes full of a compassion that threatened to undo him. And then, in the quiet sanctuary of the night, he told her. He told her about Sarah. Not the mission details, those were still locked in a vault labeled national security, but the human cost, the friendship forged in fire, the shared jokes, the unspoken understanding, the gut-wrenching guilt that he had made the call that sent her into that alley, the guilt that had been a cancer in his soul for 5 long years. He spoke of the sleepless nights, the endless what-ifs, the hollow victory of building an empire on the grave of a friendship. He talked until his voice was hoarse, and she listened. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurance. She simply absorbed his pain, her silence a profound, healing balm. For the first time since Berlin, he did not feel alone in his grief. Something fundamental shifted in the architecture of their relationship. Xander, using his considerable influence, set up a meeting with Ethan. He was stunned by the boy's raw, untamed talent. He didn't offer charity, he offered a challenge, a paid internship in Aegis's game development incubator. The look of stunned, radiant hope on Chloe's face was worth more than any corporate acquisition. He noticed the small things. The coffee she left by his elbow was always perfectly brewed, just the way he liked it. He started asking her opinion on interior designers' proposals for renovating the penthouse. Her suggestions, warmer wood tones, a reading nook by the window, more plants, were simple, human-centric. He found himself implementing every one. The fortress was being remodeled from the inside out, and he was letting it happen. The past, however, was a patient hunter. An encrypted message, routed through 7 proxy servers, landed in Xander's most secure inbox. It was from a shadowy figure known only as Orpheus, the man intelligence agencies linked to the Berlin ambush. The message was simple: "I have information about Sarah. Come alone. Docks. Midnight." It was a blatant trap. He knew it. Every logical, tactical cell in his brain screamed it. But the ghost of Sarah was a siren's call he couldn't ignore. He went alone to the designated warehouse, a decaying monolith on the Brooklyn waterfront. The air was thick with the smell of salt and rot. Rain began to fall, painting the cobblestones in slick, oily shades. The violence was swift and brutal. 3 men emerged from the shadows. Xander, his old training resurfacing in a flood of adrenaline, dispatched them with an economy of motion that was terrifying to behold. It was not a fight, it was a dissection. As the last man fell, a shot rang out, a sniper's round pinging off the metal door frame beside his head. He dove for cover, his heart hammering against his ribs. He made it back to his armored car, his knuckles bleeding, his body humming with tension, and there, huddled in the passenger seat, her face pale and terrified in the dashboard lights, was Chloe. "You followed me?" he breathed, shock cutting through the adrenaline. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her voice was steady. "I couldn't let you go alone." In her lap, she clutched his personal tablet, its screen showing a map of the docks with a live feed of his location. She had been tracking him the entire time. Back in the penthouse, the digital storm broke. Janus alerted them to a coordinated, sophisticated attack on Aegis's core servers, a digital blitzkrieg meant to overwhelm their defenses while Xander was distracted. Red alerts flashed across every screen. The fortress was under siege. For 36 hours, they lived in a state of war. Xander was a general commanding from the bridge, his fingers flying across keyboards, barking orders into his headset, a whirlwind of focused intensity. Chloe became his lieutenant, his anchor to the real world. She brought him food he forgot to eat, forced him to swallow a few hours of sleep on the couch, her presence a calm, steadying force in the eye of the hurricane. He woke once from a fitful doze to find her not at a screen, but sitting in a chair beside him, watching over him, her expression a complex tapestry of worry, admiration, and something deeper, something that made his breath catch. In that moment, the final piece of his defenses crumbled. He understood that all the firewalls in the world were useless if there was nothing worth protecting on the other side. She was what had been missing. When the last attack was neutralized and the system stabilized, a profound exhaustion settled over the penthouse. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. He found her, as he knew he would, on the terrace. She was leaning against the glass balustrade, looking out at a city waking up, the living wall of ferns and orchids behind her a vibrant, breathing contrast to the cold steel and glass. She had given him back something he thought Berlin had killed forever. He moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The city spread out before them, a landscape of infinite possibilities and hidden threats. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever," he said, his voice soft in the morning quiet. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "What?" she whispered. "Faith," he breathed out, the word feeling like a confession. "Faith that behind every firewall, beneath all the armor and the code, there's a heart that can still feel, that can still hope." He reached out, his calloused, programmer's fingers gently finding hers. They were cool against his skin. He intertwined them, a simple, profound connection. Her hand tightened in his, an answer. Outside, New York glittered, beautiful, indifferent, and full of dangers yet unknown. The mystery of Sarah still loomed in the shadows, a chapter not yet closed. Orpheus was still out there. But inside the glass fortress, two lonely hearts, scarred by loss and betrayal, had finally discovered the one variable no algorithm could ever predict, the one vulnerability worth any risk, a reason, a real, breathing, human reason, to finally, and completely, let love in.